Hello and welcome to another knitting pod. I am Lena. I'm so happy to be chatting with you guys today. As usual, I've had a ton of knitting fun this week and I've just been waiting to chit chat with you guys about it because it's been eventful, y'all. Let's jump right in. Why dilly dally? I first am going to share all my, you know, challenges of the last week with regards to my book club cardigan. I have been working on this for a couple of months now, not an absurd amount of time for such an immense undertaking. This is the cardigan that I am hoping becomes my favorite cardigan of all time, and it is by Sari Nordland. You guys, woo, Nelly, I have. Let's see, how can I show you what I've been doing? I have been working on this button band. And for those of you who have not been following along with my book club cardigan journey, it has been one of my favorite pieces to knit. I have loved every second of it. It was a huge surprise to me. I had only endeavored to knit one other fully cabled piece. It was a sweater and I got so bored with it that I ripped it out. But this, there was not a dull moment. I loved it and it's one of the most beautiful pieces I've ever seen. I'll just give you a quick peek at the back panel if you have not seen it in the last few weeks. It's really immense, so I can't show you the whole thing because I still have this collar, these needles attached. But let me just quickly tell you how the collar is constructed because it was very different than anything I've ever done. Let me show you, try to show you a little bit up close. Please forgive this unblocked, it's not as pretty as it will be, hopefully. But as you can see, this is not a collar where you pick up all the stitches and then you're just kind of knitting ribbing or something like that. It's actually really interesting because you pick up all the stitches on one needle and then you cut the yarn. Then you cast on, I think it's 16 stitches on a different needle. And you're basically knitting across the stitches. And then at the very end, you're picking up and knitting together with one of the collar stitches. So you're just slowly creating this collar. And the reason you do that in that complicated way is because you get this very beautiful, professional looking vertical knit. What am I trying to say? Like it just has this beautiful look where it's going down rather than across, if that makes sense. Anyway, I think whenever you do something for the first time, it's tricky. And this wasn't difficult. It took me a while to figure out best practices while doing this. And that left me, with a little bit of a rocky start. And so the beginning to me, it doesn't look as smooth and seamless as if I had a practice run. Do you know what I mean? Like, I almost wish I had planned to practice it and then like rip it out and redo it. The problem is, because you're knitting that last stitch together with the collar stitch, it's very hard to just rip it out without having to recast on all those stitches. So I did have to rip back, and I'll tell you why I ripped back in a second. But that meant every time I ripped it back a row, I had to kind of deconstruct that SSK back to where they needed to be. And it was just a little tricky. So if I had any advice, it would be to really kind of have a strategy before you start. If you are knitting this piece, do not give up on the collar. It's too beautiful and too Like, it's such a lovely, clean finish to this really intensely cabled cardigan. It's just the perfect contrast. I'm going to try to hold it up in a way that you can actually see it. There we go. That kind of is a little bit better. But do you see how nice and clean that looks against all this cabling? So what really threw me off was making the buttonholes. I'm not going to go into how you make the buttonholes because if you have the pattern, you'll figure it out. But took me a little bit of figuring out, and what I wish I had done was after I picked up all the collar stitches, I wish I had marked and counted the stitches between on each buttonhole that I was going to make. I did not do that, and I tried to do it by measuring like inches, and it just was completely inaccurate. So when I ripped back, when the buttonholes weren't properly spaced, I had to undo the buttonholes, and it just created quite a hot mess situation. I was this close to ripping it out and starting again, but I did not. And then again, I was this close to ripping it out when I had gotten a good amount done because I thought it was puckering, and Jessica talked me back from that ledge, which I'm so glad. So let's talk for a second about collars. Now, I know you guys have all, knit a cardigan, or most of you have, where it says pick up 3 out of every 4 stitches or whatever. And it's kind of like, why can't I just pick up stitches, right? Like this one actually was surprising. It said pick up a stitch on every row. Now, why is that important? Well, if you pick up too many stitches, you're going to have a collar that flares, because think about it like there would be more stitches in the button band than in the actual panels of the cardigan. So it's going to have nowhere to go but out. On the opposite side of that, if you don't pick up enough, it's going to pull that fabric together and you're going to get cinching. So when I was about through, maybe 8 inches, so days of work by this point, because I was doing buttonholes and ripping those back and trying to redo them, I laid it flat and I could see puckering. And I was just at that point ready to just chuck the entire thing into the ocean and move on. And it's just so sad because I'd enjoyed making this cardigan so much, and having all these issues at the very last step was just very frustrating. So of course I texted Jessica, my friend, and she was like, stop. Do not rip it out. Block that section, lay it flat, and see what happens. And I bet it is not puckering. It just looks like that in its unblocked state. I was very skeptical, but I was so sick of it and so overwhelmed by the process in that moment. I just thought, okay, like I have nothing to lose. I'm not going to do anything else right now. So let me just soak it, lay it out. And as was probably predictable, she was 100% correct, and it smoothed out, and there is not any sign of puckering. So thank goodness for Knitting Friends, you guys, and I'm just lucky because she's just head and shoulders a more experienced knitter than I am. She's been knitting for decades, and she just has a lot more experience. I just really think with knitting, it's one of those things that you have to do it to get better at it. There's no reading about it or watching podcasts. You just have to do it and make mistakes and learn to fix them, and then you become a better knitter, and then you help your much less experienced friends with their knitting. So all this collar talk to say, I feel like I have learned so much from making this collar, and I feel like it's not going to be perfect, and I'm okay with that. Like, there were things I was not okay with. Like, the buttons just become a very easy place for your eye to go. So if they're completely off in spacing, that's going to look it's going to look a little dicey. So I just could not get over that, and I was going to rip back, and it's not perfect, but I do believe once the buttons are in there, I don't think it's gonna make so much of a difference. Like, I don't know if you can see, like, here's one buttonhole, and I believe this is where I had ripped back. Now I can't even really tell, but there are mistakes. Like here, do you see that like weird stitch? When I was trying to put the stitches back onto the collar thing, the collar cord, I messed it up there somehow. But again, I think we're always our worst critics. This buttonhole is just like one stitch off, but I just didn't have the heart to rip it back. And Jessica was like, I don't think anyone's gonna notice the one stitch. It's gonna be fine. So this button band has been more difficult than the entire rest of the cardigan, I feel like, combined. However, once I got past those buttonholes and this persnickety nature of trying to figure out the right spacing, I thought it was totally fine. And now it's just flying by, and I am happy to report I should be done with it today. Let me show you this is all the stitches I have left to pick up. Oops, that's the wrong side I'm showing you from. Just this amount, and the entire collar will be done, and I can go find buttons and sew in the ends and do all that. But that is well ahead of schedule with my trip to the mountains next week, and because I really, really, really want to wear this when we're in the mountains, because it's just going to be perfect for that. Real quick, I had, like, a long time ago bought this enormous 50-inch cord for my Chow Goose set. And back then I had bought it just because I was knitting so much, and oftentimes I found myself wishing I had more cords. So I just bought a bunch of cords. For me, it's a fantastic investment because like I said, I knit a ton. So I needed a handful more of 30-inch cords and 14-inch cords. So I bought a couple more of those, and they had this 50-inch cord, and I thought, why not? I'm sure at some point it will come in handy. That point is now. This cord made this whole collar issue a gazillion times easier to deal with, because I could actually stretch the entire cardigan out with this cord in it. So I could really get a sense of, is it puckering? Is it gonna look fine? What is it looking like now? That was just and it's not that expensive, but I think if you have aspirations or do knit really oversized garments or cardigans or whatever, this 50-inch cord is invaluable. I cannot recommend it enough. When you have the right tools to do the things you need to do as a knitter, it just makes difficult things a lot easier. Like, this whole debacle would have been so much more challenging if all I had was a 30-inch cord and I was trying to stick barber cords on it and slide the stitches around. Like, I was able to mess with this whole thing without stitches falling or anything, and I think that is what kept this from being like chucked in the garbage can at some point, just out of sheer frustration. So if you are making this, and I know some of you are, what I'm doing is using this really long cord for the collar. Right now it looks all cord because I finished most of the collar. And then for the actual 16 stitches here, I'm using this very short 14-inch cord so that I have more control and it's easy to switch going back and forth. And also, one quick hot tip for you is when it's time for me to knit that one stitch off this, what I do is like a magic loop situation. I pull this cord all the way through, so these aren't stretching, but I'm able to quickly have access to this. So I'm using that extra cord and pulling it through in order to kind of keep my stitches a little more accessible. And then when I'm gonna walk away, I just pull it so that I know none of the stitches are gonna fall off. Now, I know that might not have been helpful info now, but these are like the little things that for me as a knitter, I would hear on like Andrea Mowry's podcast, and they would stick in my mind. And then like months later, it would come up and I'd have a better strategy. So I'm sharing that only in hopes that you can learn from my trial and error with this enormous collar. It's so funny, I was dreading the collar, and the things I was dreading, those aren't even the things that ended up being challenging. It's always unanticipated things, right? Because if we could anticipate them, we'd probably account for them. But these were unanticipated things, but I have high hopes that this whole project ends up being, as I hope it lives up to the expectations I have for it, because ladies and gentlemen, the expectations are high. So by the next time we meet, I hope, because next week's going to be a little weird. I'll have this done, but I don't know if I'll get to share it with you. But anyway, whatever happens, it'll be done soon and you'll get to see it. But it's so big and cozy and beautiful. And if only the weather would finally get cold, it would be absolutely perfect timing. But it's almost there, y'all. The cold weather is almost upon us. It's not quite cold yet, but I feel like in a week or two, we're going to dip down cooler. I'm not going to complain about weather because the hurricanes that have been plaguing Florida and the East Coast are just so horrific. And my heart goes out to everybody who has family, or if you're there, what a horrible situation. Just absolutely unreal. So anyway, keeping things light and happy because it's Friday and I don't want to bring you down. Let's pivot now from that big, giant, cozy, neutral cardigan to the happiest, brightest, most cheerful little pair of socks you've ever seen. So let me quickly show you. This thing has been, I walk around like a little kid with a comic book because I love it so much. Just the colors make me so happy. And also my daughter showed me this little bookmark. How cute is this bookmark for this book? It's just so perfect. And this is the Summer Lee Sock Project book that I told you I had ordered, and it came, and I just love it so much. Even if you're not into socks, it's just okay. Look at that. Look at that color. It's so good. She's so incredible with color. She's like the Stephen West of socks, She just has an eye for color and pattern. And what I like about it is that her stuff, it's not overly complicated. So the color really shines. Do you know what I mean? Sometimes I think if you make things very colorful and very complicated, it becomes a little bit chaotic. Whereas hers it's just simple and beautiful and so much fun. So this was a very, very happy purchase, and I recommend it highly. Now, if you aren't a big sock knitter, or you're trying not to spend $25 on this book or however much it was, there's nothing in here. There's a lot of patterns. So there's a lot of toes, a lot of heels, a lot of experimentation, and then there's a lot of just plain patterns at the back. But there's not knitting tips that you wouldn't be able to get off of her YouTube podcast. Do you know what I mean? She shares so much on her YouTube podcast, and if you watch that every week, there's probably not more tips in here, but I love it. And if you like having knitting books, this is probably my favorite knitting book I've ever bought. Okay, so also I bought this, by the way, I'm so excited about this purchase. It's the Chowgu shorties in the smallest sizes. So it's sizes 0 through 3. My other shorty set in the blue case is sizes 4 through 8. And I use that thing like crazy. I had it for years before it was the biggest regret because they're expensive. They're like, like it was a $90. These are like $90. Some places even more. Like at my local yarn shop, they were like 115. I bought this on Amazon for cheaper. But what was I going to say? Oh yeah, when I first bought that, I literally could not knit with those tiny tips. I was like, I mean, look at my hands, y'all. I have enormous hands, just like I have enormous feet. Very strange. I'm not tall, and I have like these giant, raw hands and feet. It just doesn't make any sense. So my fingers could not manage those tiny needles. But I practiced because I hate wasting money. And they turned out to be just such a lifesaver for sleeves because I hate doing magic loop in sleeves. And a lot of times you can end up with laddering. For me, I feel like laddering happens more with like a heavier weight yarn with sleeves than small fingering weight, but that's neither here nor there. Anyway, I borrowed Jessica's. She has this exact same shorty set to try it out because Summerlee said color work for socks is best done on shorties because then you're not having to worry about like the magic loop cord with the catching floats and all the strands, and it just feels like a hot mess. So once I had confirmed that my giant man hands can comfortably handle the tiny cords and the 0 size needle, I bought this set. So I'm very excited about that. And what I do is, I know everybody knows this, but use the longer tip for your dominant hand and the shorter tip for your non-dominant hand. So you have more needle to grip on, and then the circumference is shorter because you have the smaller one. Okay, so as I told you guys last week, I was taking Kaya to the yarn store so she could pick out the yarn colors she wanted for whatever sock she wanted me to knit her because I want to practice knitting socks for her. She picked these 2 colors. This is Cascade Heritage, which is one of my absolute favorite sock yarns because I think there is a place for kind of tonal but slightly, solid but slightly tonal, solid yarns. But for bold socks and hats and stuff where you want like a graphic contrast, I like my yarn to be flat and completely solid. I don't want tonals. I don't want shading. I don't want the yarn to be shiny. I want it to be like matte and solid. And that is what this Cascade is. This is, I wish I remembered the name. I don't remember. Wait, there's a little... Anyway, if I pull out the little paper thing, all this yarn barf is going to come out. This I know is called highlighter yellow, but she picked these 2, and these are 2 of my favorite colors together of all time. First of all, I don't think you can ever go wrong with a neon and either a neutral or a pastel. The contrast between those 2, it's just perfect. It is absolutely perfect. Like, it reminds me of like if you ate really spicy food and then you had like a creamy yogurt on the side. It's like this and this just balance each other out in that way. That it's so perfect. And the other thing I love about these is in Colorado, in the mountains, there's these flowers. If you go up on the trails, everywhere in the summer and fall that are purple with this bright neon yellow center, and there are these tiny little flowers everywhere. And even though this yellow looks so completely divorced from nature, I love that I see this in nature all the time. And it's like both really modern and fun and also natural. And I don't know, that's a hard combo to come by. I don't know if that's making sense, but like, normally when you look in nature, you see colors more like this, like a very, earthier colors, but you do see bright colors in nature, and this combo feels both like fun and also natural. I don't know why that makes me so happy, but it does. So, Are you ready to see the sock? I have been waiting all week since I cast this on to show you guys because I love it so much. I'm just gonna let y'all absorb how freaking gorgeous is this. I cannot even handle how beautiful it is. I literally had to hide this sock from myself, and I did such a good job, I couldn't find it. I had to hide it from myself because I was obsessively knitting it, and the tiny needles were giving my hands like a little tension by the end of the day, and I knew I needed to take a break, but I could not stop knitting it. So I had to hide it from myself. And you know, I don't know what it says about myself that I literally succeeded in hiding it. Maybe it's just that my brain is tired and I can't remember my name sometimes. Anyway, it's just such a good sock. This is the Linea sock. It's from the Sock Project. It's a very simple color work pattern. It's basically like 3 lavender, 1 yellow, and you repeat. And I've never done color work with these shorty needles, so I wanted something really basic that was just gonna be the same thing over and over. I didn't want to be looking at a chart. I didn't want to be catching floats. This is just a really good way for me to practice the floats being the right looseness. So what she recommends is to go up a needle size and then just to be really careful not to pull the floats too tight because otherwise the sock won't fit. So what I did was the ribbing on my double zeros. I also got triple zero Chow for the, like in a long magic loop fixed needle. And I really love them. I am such a loose knitter. And we talked last time about the fact that I'm trying to tighten up my sock tension. And one of you or several of you had suggested just drop down a needle size rather than trying to pull, because it's just, at the end of the day, I feel like it's hard to maintain unnatural tension, and it's just not great for my hand health because I know myself, and that tension in my hands will add up. So I do love my triple zeros, but for this one I use double because my daughter, she doesn't like her socks as tight as I do. So the ribbing was in double zeros, and then I went to the zero, right? It's the size 0, I believe. Yeah, in the Chow set for the body. And I tried it on myself to make sure the floats were good enough to allow you to put it on, and it works just fine. So I'm really hopeful. I am a little worried because it looks like the stitches look enormous to me, and I just worry it's going to be kind of a sloppy feeling sock. But with sock knitting, there's just so much trial and error. Like there's really not a way around just having to knit them and see what happens and then try to address one concern at a time, you know? So this time I'm just trying to take all the color work tips that Summerly has and execute them in this sock, and hopefully it fits, but it might not fit perfectly, but I know she's gonna love it. She already loves it. She loves to watch it grow, and if she's happy, and I know she will be, that's all that matters. And I cannot tell you how much joy this color combo has been to knit. I feel like I have to have a hat in this combination, either with stripes like this or like a checkerboard. If you have any hat pattern suggestions for me, please send them my way. I know James and Watts has like a checkerboard pattern, but I have never had success with his patterns. His patterns and me are like, just, we don't get along. I've never had success, so I can't be that, but I do like his style. I just don't somehow love his patterns, but I think this would be the cutest hat. It's just, this color combo is just, it's so, so, so good. And the best thing about Heritage is it's such an inexpensive yarn. It's $11 a ball at Wool & Company. At my local yarn shop, I think it's like a couple dollars more, but it's fine. I like to support my local yarn shops when I can, and it's instant gratification when you can just pop in and buy and start that day. It's like, it is the best feeling when you can do that. So this sock has been a lot of fun. I am struggling a little bit trying to figure out the right, when I say right for me, way to hold 2 strands of yarn. I don't do a lot of color work. When I do color work with a heavier yarn, I find holding both strands continental style, like separated on 2 fingers, works pretty well. But with this very thin yarn and the very small needles, it's not working very well. So what I'm doing is holding the purple continental style in my left hand, and then the yellow, I'm just like literally lifting and using it with my right, because y'all, I cannot hold yarn in my right hand in any sort of elegant way. I hold it like I'm in kindergarten, and I cannot tell you how many times I've tried to teach myself or have someone else teach me how to hold it English style and do that amazing like flicky thing that y'all do. I cannot do it. I mean, this is what kept me from knitting for years, until I saw Stephen West knitting continental style and I realized that was even a thing. That's when I started knitting, because I was a crocheter first and I always, dealt with yarn in my left hand. And I really thought knitting was just closed to me because I cannot hold it in my right hand. And my mother-in-law had told me, like, you can't hold the yarn the way I was holding it in my right hand because your hand will get all messed up. And I just don't think that's true. Like when I was watching Summer Lee's channel, she doesn't knit particularly fast, or like she doesn't have some complicated way of holding the yarn. She literally drops one strand and picks the other one up, and she does it all with her right hand. So I guess it's okay. I just wish I had more ability to use my right hand more gracefully. I think I feel self-conscious doing the caveman thing with my right hand, and absolutely no one is watching me, like literally no one is watching me, but like I want to have fluidity with both hands and I don't. So if you have any tips, that would be very helpful. I think I just need someone to sit down with me and show me how to tension it, because no matter what I do, the tension gets just too loose. It just is flopping around and I'm constantly having to reset my hand, and that just defeats the whole purpose. So anyway, that was a lot of words about English style knitting, but that is the struggle I'm having. But right now I'm just allowing myself to knit unelegantly and enjoy it as best I can. Okay, that is all the knitting I have for today. I have so much other stuff. I always say this, but I cannot share everything. And then you would be bored and you would not come back. So I got to keep you intrigued, and then you have to come back next week. What else is going on in my life? I don't know. It's been full-fledged chaos. I feel like the summer was so lovely in so many ways, and now it just feels very busy, and I just feel like I'm constantly in the car. And yesterday I had a little bit of a grumpy breakdown because I felt like 90% of my life is just driving back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. And I know it's a short-lived period of time, but sometimes it's just, you want it to be over because it's 9:30 at night and you'd rather be in bed than driving around. So anyway, that is neither here nor there. I did want to share one thing with you guys as a follow-up from years ago at this point, early in my podcast, because so many times we talk about something in life and then I don't circle back, or I don't know, life is just not so easy to circle back on sometimes because it takes things a long time to pan out. And I've talked to you guys about things that, they don't get resolved really quickly sometimes. So I did want to give you circle back around with this one thing, because it really just, I've been thinking about it a lot. So anyway, let me just tell you. couple years ago, I was telling you guys about my son, who was at that point probably in like 6th or 7th grade, and how I was very frustrated because he didn't take his academics seriously at all. And I was torn because I didn't want to damage our relationship by getting really like coming down on him hard to work harder in his academics. And I just couldn't figure it out because when I was young, it was just so innate in me, kind of just cultural expectations or the expectations of my family were so rigid and strong around academics that I didn't think there was any other way to be. And I sort of just internalized all that. And I literally just didn't know how else to be. I was very academic. I still love academics. I love reading and learning. And that was just nothing I had ever struggled with. So I didn't know how to impart to a 13-year-old my like values around working hard at academics. And I had shared this with you guys, and I was just really worried that if I pushed him really hard, it would damage the really lovely relationship we had in service of something that like I wasn't willing to sacrifice the relationship for him to work harder. Do you know what I mean? And I had talked to you about this struggle when it was happening a couple of years ago. And so many of you wrote so many messages to me that were so incredibly helpful because of where you are in your lives and in your parenting journeys, as opposed to where I am. And all that wisdom just helped me so, so much. And in particular, Sylvia, you helped me so much because you're not only a parent of older kids, but also a teacher. And you had said, you know, you saw so many kids in the classroom that didn't work hard and had so much ability, and it was unrealized potential, and how it is so important to help your kids develop that work ethic. And so many others of you had also said, you know, your relationship isn't as fragile as you think, and all these really supportive words, that it was a worthwhile place for me to think and work at how to address this with him. And so in the intervening years since that time, I can't believe it's been years now, but it definitely has. You know, the first thing I think I did was to clarify for myself what I was after. Because so many times I feel like we don't even know why we want something. And a lot of times if you dig a little below the surface, you find a really gross explanation for why you want something for your kids or for yourself. Like, it does not hold up in the light. You know, and I'm somebody who really likes to look under the hood of my own wishes and desires to make sure I'm rooting out the things that aren't serving anyone and are kind of like some sort of weird toxic cultural expectation, like, or how he reflects upon me. Like, I didn't want any of my intention to be murky in that way. And I felt like I came out the other end really strong, that my intention was not for him to be like some Ivy League grad so that it reflected upon me. That was absolutely not my intention. My reason for wanting him to take his academics and school very seriously and work really hard was truly because without working hard and having a sense of how to work hard and how to struggle and how to organize your time and all that stuff, I'm just not convinced anything in life is really possible. No matter what you end up doing in your life, you have to learn how to work hard and how to struggle through the difficult moments, whether it's being a parent or being a partner or starting a company or starting a podcast or writing a book or literally anything you want to do in this world. That skill set translates. And where else do children practice that other than school or sports or whatever it is they do? There's no way to teach them other than that. You know what I mean? So it's not inherently that I need you to have good grades. I need you to learn how to try. because without learning the skills of working hard, I don't know that life does not just happen. We don't just get handed things. And when we are just handed things, we don't take a lot of pride in them. The things that we earn and that we worked hard for are the things that mean something to us and give us self-value, right? So that's what was underneath my desire for him to learn to work harder. Number two, I realized that you can help someone along without being aggressive or punishing in any way. I learned very quickly that I did not have to punish him or yell at him or hold his feet to the fire. I could just be totally honest. Like everything I just said to you are things I said to him. And I just cannot tell you from then until now, he is like a different person. He is so hardworking, so meticulous, so serious about his academics. And to watch that transformation from a kid that just could not have cared less to a kid who's now in high school and so diligent and responsible and all the things. I had to share with you guys because you just helped me so much kind of clarify what I was going to be able to do as a parent, and to see where he is now is about as much of a reward as a parent as you could possibly get. Like parenting is just one of those things that you don't get props from anybody. The satisfaction is also sometimes invisible or such a long timeline, right? Like if you had a job and it took years to get any sort of feedback or a raise or any sort of kind word from your boss, you might quit that job, but can't quit being a parent. But I just had to share how much you helped me, all of you that gave me those thoughts back then, and how a couple years later, the fruits of all that are just so evident. And I'm so proud of myself and I'm proud of him. And I'm not saying that this strategy would work with every kid. It just really worked with him because he is, I don't know, he listens, he's going to take all that in. And we also have a really strong relationship. So I think he cared a lot to take my feedback. Do you know what I mean? And I think that came from years of just really building a loving, open relationship where he cares about my opinion. If he didn't care about my opinion, it might have ended with him blowing me off and just continuing to not really care about anything. But luckily, it's ended really beautifully. Not ended, but we're at this place where we're in 9th grade and he's just able to take on what he wants to take on. And I have so much confidence in his abilities and in the skills that he is building to do whatever he wants to do. And the best part is my daughter just watches him, and I feel like I have so much less work to do on her because she looks up to him so much. And I did so much aggressive parenting with him that she just kind of is like falling in line in so many ways behind him. It's like he's almost raising her now, and it's amazing. I even told him yesterday, I was like, I just hope you understand what a positive influence you are on her and how so much of who she is and what she does is because she's watched him and she wants to be like him. So anyway, I really wanted to share that with you. So I hope that wasn't too long-winded, but it was really like when I realized all that in my mind this week, I just felt so happy. And I feel very grateful. And I've said this so many times to you guys, but even though this podcast is just like this very abstract thing, it's such a concrete place for me. And you guys, when you leave me messages and we have these kind of back and forths, they really, really stay with me. And I just hope you know that. Like even though it's all on YouTube. It sounds fake, but it's just not. It's a real part of my life, and you guys really enrich my life so much every single day. And I love knitting, but because of you guys, I love knitting even more because I love sharing everything with you guys. So anyway, that is all I have to say, which is not all. That's a lot of words. I always end up feeling maxed out on my own words by 45 minutes. That's like the sweet spot where I'm like, okay, I've talked enough. So I think today I've talked enough. I hope you guys had fun catching up. I hope your knitting is keeping you as busy and entertained as mine. If you are doing the MCAL, I'm so curious if you're enjoying it. I am loving watching it unfold on Instagram. I am not unhappy. That's a double negative. I am happy that I'm not doing it. That sounds negative, but my knitting life right now is overflowing. I cannot keep up, and I know I wouldn't have been able to keep up with that if I had jumped on the bandwagon. So anyway, all right. I'm going to force myself to stop talking. As whenever I don't have a well-organized outline for my podcast, I feel like I end up rambling. But it is what it is. You guys know that's just how it goes sometimes. Anyway, I hope you have a lovely weekend filled with knitting and fun, and I will catch you next week. I'll see you then. Bye.